Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolute true crime cyber thriller, the incredible story of Kevin Mitnick, the kid who hacked America. For a time back in the 1990s, this guy was literally the most wanted hacker in the world. He was relentlessly hunted by the authorities, totally vilified by the media. But you know what? To really understand the dawn of modern IT security, we absolutely have to look closely at his extraordinary life.
Here's the agenda for today. We'll start with the magician of computers, move into the war games hysteria, then cover cyberspace's most wanted, capture and controversy, and finally wrap up with the white hat legacy. We've got a lot of fascinating ground to cover, so let's jump right in.
To truly grasp Mitnick's story, you've got to understand what was actually going on inside his head. As he told 60 Minutes just before getting out of prison, he didn't see himself as a terrorist. To him, it was just an exhilarating game of electronic joyriding. He wasn't trying to steal money, he was chasing that massive adrenaline rush you get from bypassing complex systems. He felt like James Bond.
Part 1. The Magician of Computers. Let's look at his early years.
Okay, so to understand Mitnick, we really have to start with him as a 12-year-old kid in Los Angeles who was obsessed with magic tricks. And if you think about it, magic is fundamentally about controlling attention and exploiting assumptions, right? Young Mitnick realized that while people love being fooled in a magic show, in everyday life, folks just generally want to be helpful and trusting. He quickly translated this love for magic into what we now call social engineering. He recognized incredibly early on that you can't just focus on the tech, you have to focus on the people using the tech. The big takeaway here, it is almost always easier to hack a trusting human being than it is to hack a complex piece of technology.
And we actually see this talent in action way back in 1975. At just 12 years old, Mitnick decides he wants to ride the LA bus system for free. So what does he do? He spins this elaborate story to a bus driver about a fake school project that requires unique hole punches. He finds out exactly where the drivers buy their specific tools and then goes and scavenges pristine, blank ticket books right out of the depot trash cans. With this brilliant three-step manipulation, a 12-year-old Mitnick rode the LA buses for free all summer long.
Fast forward to high school, and he graduates to something called phreaking. He joins this early underground community that basically manipulated phone systems just to see exactly how the network operated behind the scenes. But he wasn't just in it for the tech, he absolutely loved the social aspect. He would regularly call up phone company employees, pretend to be a colleague, and just talk his way into acquiring highly unlisted numbers. I mean, he even got Bruce Springsteen's number.
He eventually combined this social engineering with his technical curiosity to pull off one of his very first major physical breaches. Mitnick and his friends literally walk right into a Pacific telephone facility. They confidently tell the guard they work there, march straight into room 108, and just walk out with the system manuals for the massive Cosmos database. It was basically the holy grail for phreakers. But it did ultimately lead to his first juvenile probation at age 17.
All right, part 2, the war games hysteria. This is where Hollywood really starts clashing with reality. So, we hit the 1980s, and public fear starts to drastically warp what a hacker actually is. With the release of the hit movie War Games, the American public and, surprisingly, the highest levels of the US government suddenly became terrified. They honestly believed that teenage hackers typing in their bedrooms could accidentally trigger a nuclear holocaust. Almost overnight, hackers went from being obscure tech nerds to dangerous, catastrophic threats to society. And this extreme juxtaposition shows just how deeply the era misunderstood technology. Look at this. Mitnick and a friend were sneaking into the Digital Equipment Corporation's network, mostly just to win a fancy dinner bet worth about $150. Yet, when he was eventually caught for it, prosecutors leaned heavily into this movie-fueled paranoia. They stood in a courtroom and genuinely told a federal judge that Mitnick could dial into America's air defense systems and launch a nuclear war. Mitnick actually laughed out loud in court because the idea was so technically absurd, but guess what? The judge agreed with the government.
What followed was a rapid cycle of probation and arrests. He actually tried to go straight at one point, landing a legitimate programming job at GTE, but he was fired just 9 days later once they uncovered his background. This hysteria completely peaked in the late 80s, culminating in a sentence to solitary confinement. Authorities were so absolutely terrified of what he could do that they denied him access to a phone, claiming that putting a phone in Mitnick's hands was literally like handing a gun to a hitman.
Moving on to Part 3, Cyberspace's Most Wanted. The chase begins.
So, while on supervised release, Mitnick is strictly forbidden from using computers, which he famously described as having no sunshine in his life. He eventually breaks and teams up with a supposed super hacker named Eric Hines to tap into a telecom testing system. But Mitnick's instincts are sharp. Using his skills, he realizes Hines is actually an FBI informant using fake numbers. Realizing he's been compromised, Mitnick destroys his evidence, clones his cell phone, and flees Los Angeles, officially becoming the target of a massive federal manhunt.
The narrative hits its absolute climax right here. Mitnick, actively on the run, decides to target the private servers of a literal cyber superhero named Tsutomu Shimomura. This guy was a top-tier security expert working closely with the FBI and the NSA. And Mitnick leaves these bizarre, taunting, kung fu movie-style voicemails on his machine. It was a brazen, direct challenge to the establishment.
To bypass Shimomura's world-class security, Mitnick used an incredibly advanced, previously theoretical technique known as IP spoofing. By modifying the source address in a data packet to make it look like it was coming from a trusted internal machine, he completely bypassed the network defenses. He stole tens of thousands of emails, personal files, and highly sensitive security tools. This hack was so massive it prompted a national security warning and even made the front page of the New York Times.
Part 4. Capture and Controversy. Let's talk about the takedown. Now it's a direct high-stakes intellectual duel. Shimomura wasn't just going to let this go. He ingeniously tracks his stolen files to a storage account on an internet provider called Netcom. Working with their techs, they deploy a real-time keylogger to watch Mitnick's digital moves exactly as he's chatting on forums. By cross-referencing login times, they trace the connection directly to an apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina. And on February 15, 1995, that led the FBI right to his front door. But I want you to look at this number, because perhaps nothing highlights the hysteria of this entire era better than the final payout. After his dramatic capture and literally years in pretrial detention, the dust finally settles. And despite corporations initially claiming nearly $300 million in damages from his joyriding, his actual ordered restitution? Just $4,125. That's it.
This massive discrepancy in his charges is exactly what fueled the global Free Kevin movement. Supporters in the wider hacker community argued his case was wildly exaggerated by prosecutors who just didn't understand the tech, and a media that was incredibly hungry for a supervillain. They rallied behind him, quite literally defacing major websites like the New York Times and Yahoo in protest, demanding his release.
And finally, Part 5, the White Hat Legacy, how he goes from fugitive to expert. Even after his release in January of 2000, Mitnick was initially banned from using screens of any kind for 3 full years. Think about that. No cell phones, no internet, not even a television. But as his probation finally lifted, he managed to completely redefine his legacy. He transformed his unparalleled skills into a highly lucrative career, becoming a legitimate, respected security consultant. He wrote books and helped massive corporations fix the exact vulnerabilities he used to exploit right up until he passed away in 2023.
The fundamental difference between his days as an international fugitive and his later success as a corporate consultant boils down to simply one word: authorization. Having the legal permission to perform his digital magic tricks took him from being a hunted criminal to an industry pioneer. The underlying skills were exactly the same. It was only the context that changed.
So, we have to leave you with this final thought based on the incredible evidence we've walked through today. Was Kevin Mitnick really the dark side menace and dangerous electronic terrorist the media painted him out to be in the 1990s? Or was he just a brilliant digital magician, a curious electronic joyrider, showing us the glaring holes in our own pockets long before we were truly ready to see them?
Click the subscribe button. Then, click the bell icon and select all to get every notification.